The sun painted the harsh Nevada terrain in bruised hues of orange and purple as Cora Davenport stepped down from the stagecoach, her skirts heavy with the dust of 1,000 miles. She clutched her worn carpetbag with white knuckles, wincing as the motion pulled at the tender flesh beneath her sleeve. Pain was a companion she'd grown accustomed to during the long journey west. "Cimarron, miss." "End of the line," the driver called down, tossing her second bag into the dirt without ceremony. "Cimarron, Nevada Territory, 1875. The last place anyone would think to look for her." Cora surveyed the single dusty street lined with weathered buildings, her heart sinking at the desolation. But desolation was what she needed now, a place to disappear. "Need help with those bags, madam?" a boy of about 12 approached, eager for a coin. "I can manage," she answered softly, reaching for the second bag and feeling the strain across her ribs. She fought to keep her face neutral despite the shooting pain. 3 weeks since she'd fled Philadelphia, and still the wounds her husband had left as a parting gift hadn't healed. The town's main street was alive with the usual frontier commerce, a saloon doing brisk business despite the early hour, a general store, a small hotel that had seen better days, and what appeared to be a doctor's office. Cora headed toward the hotel, keeping her eyes down and her bonnet pulled low. "Mrs. Wilson's boarding house," the weathered sign read. It would have to do. She needed work and shelter before the meager funds sewn into her corset ran out. Cora mounted the steps slowly, each one an exercise in concealing pain. The lobby was clean but sparse, with faded floral wallpaper and a worn settee. A stern-looking woman in her 50s appeared from a back room, wiping her hands on an apron. "You looking for a room?" the woman asked, eyeing Cora's travel-worn appearance with suspicion. "Yes, and perhaps work if there's any to be had," Cora replied, her cultured Eastern accent drawing a raised eyebrow from the proprietress. $2 a week for the room, includes breakfast. What kind of work you after?" Mrs. Wilson came closer, studying Cora's face. "I can cook, clean, so anything respectable." Cora forced herself to meet the woman's gaze, though every instinct told her to look away, to hide the fading yellow bruise at her temple that her bonnet didn't quite conceal. Mrs. Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Running from something, are you?" Cora stiffened. "I'm starting over, madam." Something in the older woman's face softened. "Aren't we all, dearie? I've got a position at the diner across the way. Cook just up and left last week. You know how to make a decent stew and apple pie, I do. 6 days a week, Sundays off. Pays not much, but with tips you'll manage the room and then some." Cora exhaled slowly, relief flooding her chest. "Thank you, when can I start?" "Tomorrow morning, 5 o'clock, I'll show you to your room." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the alley behind the building. As soon as Mrs. Wilson left, Cora sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion of her journey. She unpacked her meager belongings, arranging them carefully in the single dresser. At the bottom of her bag lay her most valuable possession, a silver-framed daguerreotype of her parents, both long dead. Their faces smiled up at her, unaware that their beloved daughter would end up married to a monster, fleeing across the country to escape his rage. Cora unwrapped the bandage around her wrist, revealing the purple-yellow marks of fingers that had gripped too tight. Her ribs ached from the final beating, the one that had convinced her she wouldn't survive another. She'd fled in the night with only what she could carry, using the money she'd secretly saved from selling her mother's jewelry. After rebandaging her wrist, Cora washed the travel dust from her face and changed into her one decent day dress. She needed supplies, and more importantly, she needed to learn the rhythm of this town that would be her sanctuary or her prison, depending on how well she could disappear into it. The general store was busy when she entered, ranchers and townsfolk gathering supplies for the coming week. Cora kept to herself, gathering only essentials: soap, hairpins, a sewing kit. The proprietor, a friendly man with spectacles perched on his nose, chatted amiably as he totaled her purchases. "New in town, miss. Don't believe I've seen you before." "Yes, just arrived today. I'll be working at the diner," she responded politely but tersely. Well, welcome to Cimarron. I'm Samuel Green. Anything you need, you just ask. Thank you, Mr. Green. Cora paid and gathered her parcels, turning to leave when the door swung open and a tall figure blocked the sunlight. The man who entered removed his hat, revealing sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His presence seemed to fill the small store, though he moved with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. A cowboy, from the look of his worn leather chaps and the dust that covered his clothes. "Afternoon, Kip," Samuel called out. "Thought you were out at the Double Cross for another week." Cattle drive finished early, droughts pushing everything north faster than expected. The man's voice was deep and resonant like distant thunder. He glanced at Cora, a polite nod acknowledging her presence. "Miss, this here's Kip Keller, foreman at the Double Cross Ranch. Kip, this lady's new in town, going to be working at the diner." "Madam," the cowboy said with a respectful tip of his hat. His eyes lingered on her face a moment too long, and Cora knew he'd seen the bruise she'd tried to conceal with face powder. "Pleased to meet you," she murmured, clutching her packages closer and making a quick exit. Back in her room, Cora's heart raced. The cowboy's penetrating gaze had seen too much. She'd have to be more careful. No one could know what she was running from or why. If Charles ever found her, Cora shuddered at the thought of her husband. Charles Davenport, respected Philadelphia businessman by day, violent drunkard by night. The man whose ring she still wore because removing it might raise questions she couldn't answer. The man who'd promised to find her if she ever fled, who'd sworn she'd never escape him. She'd need to create a new story for herself here. A widow, perhaps. Yes, a young widow traveling west for a fresh start that would explain her solitary state and discourage unwanted attention. The next morning came too quickly. Cora rose before dawn, dressed carefully in her plain work dress, and twisted her auburn hair into a severe bun at the nape of her neck. She applied extra powder to the fading bruises, arranging her collar to hide the marks on her neck. The diner was already bustling when she arrived. Mrs. Wilson introduced her to the waitress, a friendly girl named Betsy who couldn't be more than 17, and showed her the small kitchen with its wood-burning stove and well-used cookware. Menus on the wall there. Most folks order the daily special, keeps it simple. You good with breakfast foods? Mrs. Wilson asked, handing Cora an apron. "Yes, madam. My mother taught me to cook from a young age. Good. I'll be at the boarding house if you need anything. Betsy knows how things run." The morning passed in a blur of flapjacks, eggs, and bacon, with Cora settling into the familiar rhythm of cooking. The work was hard but straightforward, and the kitchen's heat helped ease the ache in her bones. By midday, she'd served nearly 30 customers and received approving nods from most. "You're doing great," Betsy said during a brief lull. Mrs. Wilson was worried she wouldn't find someone who could cook worth a lick. "Thank you, it feels good to be useful." And it did. For the first time in years, Cora was earning her own way, making her own decisions. The afternoon brought fewer customers, mostly ranchers coming in for coffee and pie before heading back to work. Cora was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door jingled, and she looked up to see the cowboy from the general store Kip Keller entering with 2 other men. They settled at a table by the window, and Betsy hurried to take their orders. Cora busied herself with the stove, hoping to avoid another interaction, but the small diner made that impossible. "Miss Cook," Betsy called, "3 specials and a piece of that apple pie you made this morning." Cora acknowledged the order with a nod and set to work, aware of the cowboy's conversation drifting into the kitchen. "Town's getting bigger," one was saying. "Railroad survey team was through last week, might get a spur line through here next year." "About time," another responded. "Tired of driving cattle 3 days to the nearest loading point. Would change things around here for sure," came Kip's distinctive voice. "Not all for the better, I reckon." Cora prepared their meal's beef stew with fresh baked bread and handed the plates to Betsy. As she turned back to the stove, pain shot through her ribs, causing her to gasp and drop a spoon. "You all right?" Betsy asked, concern evident in her young face. "Fine, just clumsy," Cora replied, but when she bent to retrieve the spoon, the room spun. She gripped the edge of the work table, waiting for the dizziness to pass. "Here, let me help." A deep voice behind her made Cora jump. Kip Keller stood in the doorway to the kitchen, watching her with those perceptive eyes. "Thank you, but I'm quite capable," she said stiffly, straightening despite the pain. "Never said you weren't, madam." He bent to pick up the spoon, placing it in the wash basin, just offering a neighborly hand. There was something in his manner that was both direct and unthreatening. He kept a respectful distance, seeming to understand her wariness. "How's the stew?" Cora asked, changing the subject. "Best I've had since coming west," he replied with a small smile. "You've got a gift. It's just food, Mr. Keller. Out here, good food's more than just sustenance. It's comfort." He studied her face for a moment. "You're not from around these parts?" "No," she didn't elaborate. "Well, welcome to Cimarron. If you need anything, the Double Cross is just 5 miles north. Ask anyone, they'll point the way." Cora nodded, unsure how to respond to this man who seemed genuinely kind without wanting anything in return, a concept that had become foreign during her 5 years of marriage. "I should get back to work," she said finally. "Of course. Good day, miss." She hesitated only briefly. "Cora." "Cora Davis." She used her mother's maiden name, another small act of liberation. "Miss Davis." He tipped his hat and returned to his companions. Over the next week, Cora settled into the routine of the diner. The work was exhausting but satisfying, and she found herself beginning to relax slightly as each day passed without any sign that Charles had discovered her whereabouts. Her bruises began to fade, though the pain in her ribs lingered. She learned the rhythms of the small frontier town, which ranchers came in on which days, which miners were courteous and which were trouble after a few drinks, which shopkeepers' wives gossiped and which kept to themselves. Mrs. Wilson proved to be firm but fair, and Betsy became something of a friend, though Cora kept the details of her past vague. Kip Keller came to the diner every few days, sometimes alone, sometimes with ranch hands. He always greeted her politely, but never pressed for conversation beyond what was comfortable. She noticed how he treated everyone with the same quiet respect, from Betsy to the old prospector who could barely afford his coffee. One evening, as Cora was closing up the diner, a commotion erupted in the saloon across the street. Raised voices and the sound of breaking glass carried through the twilight air. She hurried to finish her duties, wanting to be safely back at the boarding house before any trouble spilled out into the street. As she locked the diner door, 3 men stumbled out of the saloon, clearly intoxicated and arguing loudly. One looked up and spotted her standing alone. "Well, looky here, boys, it's that pretty new cook," he slurred, changing direction to head toward her. Cora froze, her heart hammering against her injured ribs. The man's posture, his tone, it was all too familiar, too reminiscent of Charles on his worst nights. "Evening, madam," the drunk called, approaching with his companions in tow. "You shouldn't be out all alone at this hour. Dangerous for a pretty lady." "I'm just heading home," Cora managed, her voice steadier than her nerves as she backed away. "Let me escort you," the man insisted, reaching for her arm. "The lady said she's heading home." Kip's voice cut through the tension as he stepped between Cora and the drunks. She hadn't seen where he'd come from, but his sudden presence was like a shield. "Mind your business, Keller," one of the other men growled. "Miss Davis is under my protection, and that makes it my business." Kip's stance was relaxed but alert, one hand resting casually near the pistol at his hip. Something in his demeanor must have registered with the drunks, because after a tense moment they backed down. "Didn't mean no harm," the first man muttered, "just being friendly." "Be friendly somewhere else," Kip suggested, his tone making it clear it wasn't a request. The men retreated back toward the saloon, grumbling but subdued. "Thank you," Cora said quietly when they were alone. "Though I don't recall asking for your protection, Mr. Keller." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, you didn't, but sometimes folks need things they don't ask for." The statement hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Cora pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "May I walk you back to the boarding house?" he asked. "No strings attached, just making sure you get there safely." Cora hesitated, then nodded. They walked in silence for a few moments, the sounds of the saloon fading behind them. "How are you finding Cimarron?" Kip asked finally. "It's different from what I'm accustomed to," she answered honestly. "Most folks come out here running toward something or away from something," he observed. "Sometimes both." Cora glanced at him sharply, but his expression held no judgment. "And which were you, Mr. Keller?" "Both, I reckon." He looked up at the emerging stars. "Left Boston 8 years ago after my father died. Had plans to make a fortune in silver mining, ended up wrangling cattle instead. That's quite a change. Life rarely goes according to plan out here, that's the beauty of it." They reached the boarding house and Cora paused at the steps. "Thank you for the escort," Kip nodded. "Miss Davis, I hope you don't think I'm overstepping, but if you're in some kind of trouble, I'm not," she interrupted quickly. "There are people here who would help," he finished gently. "Myself included." Cora felt her carefully constructed walls trembling. It had been so long since anyone had offered help without ulterior motives. "I appreciate that, Mr. Keller, but I can take care of myself." Never doubted it for a moment. He tipped his hat. "Good night, Miss Davis." Cora watched him walk away, conflicting emotions churning inside her. Part of her wanted to trust his kindness, while the cautious part that had kept her alive warned against letting anyone too close. The following Sunday, her day off, Cora decided to explore beyond the main street. She dressed in her simplest gown, a blue cotton that had seen better days but was comfortable for walking. The morning air was crisp, the Nevada sky a brilliant blue that seemed to stretch forever. She followed a narrow path that led away from town toward a small creek, enjoying the solitude and the gentle sounds of water over rocks. It was the first time since arriving that she'd been truly alone, without the walls of the boarding house or the bustle of the diner surrounding her. Finding a flat rock beside the creek, Cora sat down and removed her shoes, allowing her feet to dangle in the cool water. She closed her eyes, feeling the sun on her face and allowing herself a moment of peace. "Didn't expect to find anyone out here," a familiar voice said, startling her from her reverie. Cora opened her eyes to see Kip Keller standing a respectful distance away, leading a dappled gray horse by the reins. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he continued. "I often bring Dust here to drink on Sundays." "Dust?" she questioned, quickly pulling her feet from the water and reaching for her shoes. "My horse," he explained, patting the animal's neck. "Named her that because no matter how often I brush her, she always looks like she's been rolling in it." Despite herself, Cora smiled. "She's beautiful. Don't tell her that. Already thinks too highly of herself." His tone was light, but his eyes watched her carefully, noting how she winced as she bent to lace her shoes. "You're injured," he stated simply. "It's nothing. An old hurt that's taking its time to heal." Kip led his horse to the water's edge, letting her drink while he remained standing, giving Cora space. "Sometimes old hurts never fully heal if they're not tended properly," he said after a moment. "Are you a doctor now, Mr. Keller?" She asked, a defensive edge to her voice. "No, madam, just someone who's seen his share of injuries, both visible and hidden." Cora stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I should be getting back, of course." He didn't move to stop her. "But Miss Davis, if you need a doctor, Doc Miller is discreet, helped many a person who didn't want questions asked." She paused, wondering what this cowboy thought he knew about her situation. "Thank you for the recommendation, but as I said, it's healing." Kip nodded, accepting her rebuff with grace. "It's a fine day for a ride if you've ever had an interest in horseback." The abrupt change of subject caught her off guard. "Aye, it's been many years. Dust here is gentle as a lamb. If you ever want to remember the feeling of freedom that comes with riding, the offer stands." Freedom. The word resonated in Cora's chest like the toll of a bell. How long had it been since she'd felt truly free? Before Charles, certainly. Perhaps even before her parents died and she'd been left at the mercy of an uncle who'd seen her only as a burden to be married off. Perhaps someday, she heard herself say, surprising them both. A smile spread across Kip's face, transforming his weathered features. "I'll hold you to that, Miss Davis." As summer progressed into autumn, Cora found herself settling into life in Cimarron. Her cooking at the diner had earned her a reputation, and business increased as word spread. Mrs. Wilson even gave her a small raise, allowing Cora to add a few modest comforts to her room. Her ribs healed, though sometimes she still felt phantom pain when the weather changed. The bruises faded entirely, but she continued to wear high collars and long sleeves, armor against questions and her own memories. Kip Keller became a regular presence in her life, nothing improper, just friendly interactions at the diner and occasional encounters around town. He never pressured her for information about her past or for companionship beyond what she offered, but he was steadfast in his quiet support. When a drifter became aggressive after she refused his advances at the diner, Kip happened to be there and firmly escorted the man out. When she struggled with a heavy delivery of flour, he appeared as if by magic to help carry it inside. Small kindnesses, offered without expectation of return. Gradually, Cora found herself looking forward to his visits, enjoying their brief conversations about books they'd read or places they'd seen. He told her about the Double Cross Ranch, about cattle breeding and the challenges of the coming winter. She shared sanitized stories of Philadelphia, careful to omit anything that might reveal too much. One crisp October afternoon, Kip entered the diner just as Cora was preparing to close. "We're about to," she began, then recognized him. "Oh, Mr. Keller. I'm afraid we're out of almost everything this late." "Actually, I came to make good on an offer," he said, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. "It's your day off tomorrow, and the aspens up in the foothills are turning gold. Thought you might like that horseback ride we discussed if you're feeling up to it." Cora hesitated. It would mean being alone with him, away from town, yet in the months she'd known him, he'd never given her reason to fear him. "I don't have proper riding clothes," she stalled. "A regular skirt will do fine for a gentle ride. Dust can handle a side saddle passenger." She thought of another Sunday spent alone in her room, reading the same tattered book for the dozenth time. "What time?" His face brightened. "I could meet you here at 9 if that suits." "9 it is," she agreed, a flutter of anticipation mingling with apprehension in her stomach. The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect riding weather. Cora dressed in her sturdiest skirt and boots, wrapping a warm shawl around her shoulders. She arrived at the diner at precisely 9 to find Kip already waiting, leading 2 horses, his gray mare and a gentle-looking chestnut gelding. "Good morning," he greeted her, his smile warming his storm-gray eyes. "I hope you don't mind, but I borrowed Copper here from the livery. Thought you might prefer your own mount rather than riding double." Cora approached the chestnut, who nuzzled her hand curiously. "He seems sweet. Gentlest horse in the territory. Owner uses him to teach children to ride." With Kip's assistance, Cora mounted the horse, adjusting her skirts and finding her balance in the side saddle. It had been years since she'd ridden, not since before her marriage when Charles had deemed it unsuitable for a woman of her station. "Comfortable?" Kip asked, mounting his own horse. "Yes, surprisingly so." And it was true, something about being on horseback again felt right, like reconnecting with a part of herself she'd forgotten. They rode slowly out of town, Kip leading them north along a well-worn trail. The morning air was invigorating, and Cora found herself relaxing as the familiar rhythm of the horse's gait soothed her nerves. "You've ridden before," Kip observed as she adjusted the reins with practiced ease. "My father taught me when I was young." "We had a small estate outside Philadelphia with several horses." She smiled at the memory. "I used to ride every day." "What changed?" he asked gently. Cora's smile faded. "Life, circumstances." Kip nodded, not pressing further. "Well, you haven't lost your seat." Copper approves. He's particular about his riders. They followed the trail into the foothills, where stands of aspen trees glowed golden against the blue sky. The beauty of it took Cora's breath away. "It's magnificent," she said as they stopped to rest the horses in a small clearing. "One of my favorite places," Kip agreed, dismounting and helping Cora down from her horse. "I come here when the ranch gets too crowded or when I need to remember why I stayed out west. Do you ever regret it, leaving Boston?" He considered the question as he secured the horses to a nearby tree. "Sometimes I miss the convenience of city life or certain foods you can't get out here, But no, I don't regret it. I found something in these open spaces that I never had back east. What's that? Room to breathe, to be myself without constantly measuring up to someone else's expectations. He spread a small blanket on a patch of grass. Brought some lunch if you're hungry. They sat together, sharing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and apples. Conversation flowed easily, touching on books they'd both read, places they'd visited, dreams they'd had as children. Cora found herself laughing at Kip's dry humor, a sound so foreign to her ears that it startled her. "You should laugh more often," Kip said, his expression soft. "It suits you." Cora looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "I haven't had much cause for laughter recently." "No, I don't suppose you have." He studied her profile for a moment. "Cora, Miss Davis, I hope you know you're safe here, in Cimarron, I mean." The sudden seriousness in his tone made her turn back to him. "What makes you think I don't feel safe?" The way you flinch when a man raises his voice. "How you always sit with your back to the wall and your eyes on the door, the bruises you had when you first arrived." He held her gaze steadily. "Someone hurt you badly and you're still looking over your shoulder." Cora felt exposed, vulnerable. Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling under his perceptive gaze. "You don't know anything about me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're brave," he countered. "I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you're kind to people who have been unkind to you. And I know someone made you believe you deserved pain, which is the biggest lie there is." Tears welled in Cora's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why do you care? What am I to you?" Kip reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hand. "At first you were someone who needed help but was too proud to ask for it. Now you're someone I admire, someone I think about when I'm not around you, someone I'd like to know better if you'd allow it." The sincerity in his voice undid her. A tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. "My husband," she began, the words feeling like broken glass in her throat. "Charles, he's not a kind man." Kip's hand tightened slightly around hers, but he remained silent, letting her speak. "It wasn't always bad. When we first married, he was charming, attentive. But after the first year, things changed. A business deal went sour and he started drinking. The first time he hit me, he wept afterward, promised it would never happen again." She gave a hollow laugh. "I believed him. It's not your fault," Kip said softly. "None of it." "I stayed for 4 more years," she continued, the words coming faster now, like water through a broken dam. "It got worse. He was careful, though never hit me where it would show when we went out. He's a respected businessman, you see. Appearances matter." Kip's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. "How did you get away?" "He broke my ribs. I thought I was going to die that night." Her free hand unconsciously went to her side. "When he passed out, I packed what I could carry, took the money I'd hidden, and left. I've been traveling for weeks, never staying in one place too long, terrified he'd find me, until Cimarron." "Until Cimarron," she agreed. "I ran out of money and strength, and something about this place, it felt right." Kip released her hand and reached up slowly to brush the tear from her cheek. "Thank you for trusting me with your truth." "I shouldn't have told you," she said, sudden panic rising in her chest. "If Charles ever found out I was here, he won't," Kip said firmly. "And if by some miracle he did, he'd have to go through me and half the town to get to you. You're not alone anymore, Cora." She looked into his eyes and saw no pity, only understanding and a fierce protectiveness that should have frightened her, but instead made her feel safer than she had in years. "I don't know how to be anything but afraid anymore," she admitted. "Then we'll take it one day at a time." He smiled gently. "Starting with enjoying this beautiful day and the company of someone who thinks you're the strongest person he's ever met." Cora felt something shift inside her, like ice breaking up after a long winter. For the first time since fleeing Philadelphia, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps there might be a future where she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder. They returned to the horses and spent the afternoon riding through the golden aspen groves, Kip pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the area. By the time they returned to town, the sun was setting, painting the buildings of Cimarron in shades of amber and rose. "Thank you," Cora said as Kip helped her dismount in front of the boarding house. "For the ride and for listening." "Thank you for coming," he replied, "and for trusting me." Their eyes met, and for a moment Cora thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back respectfully. "Good night, Miss Davis." "Good night, Mr. Keller." As autumn deepened, Cora and Kip's friendship grew. He began escorting her to church on Sundays, a gesture that prompted knowing smiles from the townspeople but no unkind gossip. Mrs. Wilson, who had initially been suspicious of any man showing interest in her boarder, gradually warmed to Kip after observing his respectful behavior. Cora found herself looking forward to their conversations, to the small moments of connection throughout her busy days. Kip never pushed for more than she was ready to give, never made her feel rushed or pressured. It was a stark contrast to her courtship with Charles, which had been a whirlwind of expensive gifts and grand gestures that had swept her off her feet before she truly knew the man behind the charm. One evening in early November, as Cora was closing the diner, the town marshal entered, his expression grave. "Evening, Miss Davis, got a minute?" Of course, Marshal Evans. "Is something wrong?" The lawman removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Got a telegram today from Philadelphia. Man named Charles Davenport is looking for his wife, Cora. Says she's missing, might be in danger. Asking law enforcement across the territories to keep an eye out." Cora's blood turned to ice in her veins. "I see." The marshal studied her face carefully. "Now, I don't make it my business to pry into folks' pasts. Everyone in Cimarron's got a history they might not want aired, but if there's something I should know." She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "Charles Davenport is my husband, Marshal. I left him because he beat me so badly I nearly died. I'm not missing, I'm hiding." Marshal Evans nodded slowly, as if her words merely confirmed a suspicion. "Figured it might be something like that. Seen my share of women running from mean husbands. What will you do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Well, officially, I never got that telegram." He settled his hat back on his head. "Unofficially, might be good for you to know he's looking. Man's offering a reward for information. Thank you for warning me. You've made a place for yourself here, Miss Davis. Good food, fair prices, kind to folks down on their luck. That counts for something in my book." The marshal headed for the door, then paused. "Might want to let Keller know about this. Man's sweet on you and he's got influence in these parts." After the marshal left, Cora locked the diner door with trembling hands. The fragile sense of security she'd built over the past months was shattering. Charles was looking for her, and if he was offering a reward, it was only a matter of time before someone recognized her description. She needed to run again. But where? And with what money? Most of her earnings went to her room and board, with precious little saved. She'd need time to gather funds, perhaps a week or more. Lost in her spiraling thoughts, she didn't notice the figure approaching until a soft knock on the diner window startled her. Kip stood outside, concern evident in his face. She hesitated, then unlocked the door. "Cora, you're white as a sheet," he said as he stepped inside. "What's happened?" The genuine worry in his voice broke through her paralysis. "He's looking for me, Charles. The marshal just told me he sent telegrams offering a reward." Kip's expression hardened. "Did Evans say what he plans to do?" He said officially he never received the telegram. "Good man." Kip guided her to a chair sitting across from her. "But you're thinking of running again." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "I can't stay. It's only a matter of time before someone decides the reward is worth more than my friendship. You don't have to face this alone." Kip reached for her hand, which she gave without hesitation. "The double cross is remote, with plenty of places to lie low. You'd be safe there." "I can't impose. It's not an imposition. The ranch owner's wife has been after me to find a cook for the bunkhouse. The men are tired of my beans and bacon. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you sanctuary, Cora, a place to catch your breath and decide what you want to do next." His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "No strings attached. You'd have your own cabin, complete privacy." Cora studied his face, searching for any hint of deception or ulterior motive, but found only sincerity and something deeper that made her heart race. "Why would you do this for me?" Kip was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because in all my 35 years, I've never met anyone who deserved a second chance more than you do. Because you make me want to be a better man. and because the thought of you disappearing from my life makes everything else seem dim by comparison." It was the closest he'd come to declaring his feelings, and Cora felt her own emotions rising to meet his. "When would we leave?" she asked softly. Relief flooded his features. "Tomorrow morning, if you can be ready. I'll speak to Mrs. Wilson tonight, explain you're taking a position at the ranch." "What about the diner? Betsy's sister is looking for work. She can cook almost as well as you." He squeezed her hand gently. "Pack light but warm. Winter comes early in the mountains." After Kip left, Cora returned to the boarding house and began packing her few possessions. Her mind raced with doubts and fears, but underneath was a current of something that felt strangely like hope. She was placing an enormous amount of trust in Kip Keller, a man she'd known for less than half a year. Yet something told her this trust wasn't misplaced. He'd had countless opportunities to take advantage of her vulnerability and had never once crossed the line of propriety. His offer of sanctuary came with no expectations beyond her cooking for the ranch hands. Mrs. Wilson knocked on her door as Cora was folding her spare dress. "So you're off to the Double Cross," the older woman said, leaning against the doorframe. "Kip told me. Yes, it seems like a good opportunity." Cora continued packing, avoiding the landlady's knowing gaze. Opportunity is it?" Mrs. Wilson entered the room, closing the door behind her. "Girl, I wasn't born yesterday. That man's in love with you, and unless I miss my guess, you're not indifferent to him either." Cora's hands stilled on the fabric. "It's not like that. He's offering me a job, that's all. Maybe that's all he's asking for, but it's not all he's hoping for, Mrs." Wilson sat on the edge of the bed. "When my Harold was courting me, he offered to fix my pa's wagon wheel, didn't ask for nothing in return, just wanted to help. That's how the good ones start. They see a need and they fill it, no strings attached." "I'm still married," Cora said quietly. "To a man who beat you and is now hunting you like an animal." Mrs. Wilson's voice softened. "Sometimes, child, God gives us a second chance at happiness. It's not a sin to take it." Cora looked up, surprised. "I thought you'd disapprove of you finding safety and maybe love with a good man." "No, child, I disapprove of you staying shackled to a monster because of a piece of paper." She patted Cora's hand. "Kip Keller's solid, known him since he came to these parts, never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you." "I don't know if I can trust my judgment anymore," Cora admitted. "I thought Charles was a good man once." "That's the difference, isn't it? You thought Charles was good, we all know Kip is." Mrs. Wilson stood. "Your room will be waiting if things don't work out at the ranch, and Cora, be happy, you deserve it." The next morning, Kip arrived with a wagon and 2 saddled horses. He loaded Cora's trunk while she said goodbye to Betsy and Mrs. Wilson. "Ready?" he asked as he helped her onto the wagon seat. "As I'll ever be," she replied, casting one last glance at the town that had been her haven for nearly 4 months. The journey to the Double Cross Ranch took most of the day. As they traveled, the terrain became more rugged, the mountains looming closer. Kip pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, his deep voice a comforting counterpoint to the creak of the wagon wheels. The ranch was named by the original owner, he explained, as they followed a winding trail through a pine forest. Said the land was so good it was like getting paid twice for the same work. "How long have you been foreman?" 5 years now. Started as a regular hand, worked my way up." He guided the horses around a bend, revealing a breathtaking view of a valley below. "There it is, Double Cross." The ranch spread across the valley floor, a collection of well-maintained buildings surrounding a large main house. Fenced pastures held cattle and horses, and in the distance, Cora could see the silhouettes of cowboys moving a herd toward one of the barns. "It's beautiful," she said, genuinely impressed by the orderly operation. "Wait until you meet the people. The Hendersons, they own the place, are good folks, treat their hands like family." As they descended into the valley, a middle-aged woman emerged from the main house, shading her eyes against the late afternoon sun. Kip waved, and she waved back enthusiastically. "That's Martha Henderson," he told Cora. "She's been after me to find a proper cook since old Pete retired last spring." Martha greeted them warmly as Kip brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "About time you brought our new cook around. I was beginning to think you'd made her up." Martha, this is Cora Davis. Cora, Martha Henderson, the real boss of Double Cross, Kip introduced them with a smile. Nonsense, Martha laughed, extending her hand to Cora. Welcome to our home, Miss Davis. Kip says you're a miracle worker in the kitchen. He exaggerates, Cora replied, taking the woman's hand. But I do enjoy cooking. Well, you'll have 20 hungry cowboys to practice on. Come, let me show you where you'll be staying while Kip unloads your things. Martha led Cora to a small but well-built cabin a short distance from the bunkhouse. This was Pete's place before he retired to live with his daughter in California. It's simple but private. The cabin consisted of a single room with a bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a wood-burning stove, and a wardrobe. Windows on 3 sides let in plenty of light, and someone had placed a vase of late wildflowers on the table. It's perfect, Cora said, genuinely pleased with the cozy space. The cookhouse is over there, Martha pointed to a long, low building adjacent to the bunkhouse. It's well stocked. My husband believes well-fed hands are loyal hands. You'll serve 3 meals a day with Sundays off when I take over. The men eat at 6, noon, and 6 again. I'll be ready to start tomorrow morning, Cora assured her. Excellent. Now you must be tired from your journey. Rest up and join us for supper at the main house tonight at 7. Nothing formal, just family. Martha squeezed her arm gently. And Cora, whatever brought you here, you're safe now. Kip told us enough that we understand. After Martha left, Kip arrived with Cora's trunk and a few additional supplies. Martha's invited me to dinner at the main house as well, he said as he placed the trunk at the foot of the bed. I can escort you up, or if you'd prefer some time alone to settle in. I'd appreciate the escort, Cora replied. Everything's happening so quickly, it's nice to have a familiar face. I understand. He hesitated, then added, Cora, I want you to know that while I'm thrilled you're here, I meant what I said about no expectations. This is your sanctuary for as long as you need it. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. Thank you, Kip, for everything. He tipped his hat with a smile. I'll be back at 6:45. The cabin has a lock and there's extra firewood stacked outside. If you need anything before then, my quarters are above the stable. After he left, Cora unpacked her few belongings and explored her new home. The cabin was rustic but clean, with a solidity that suggested it could withstand the harshest winter storms. Through the windows, she could see the ranch spread out before her, the corrals, the bunkhouse, the stables, and beyond them, the vast expanse of grazing land bordered by forests and mountains. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to think beyond mere survival. This remote ranch, miles from the nearest town, offered not just safety from Charles but the possibility of building something new. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but it no longer threatened to overwhelm her. Dinner at the Henderson home was a relaxed affair. John Henderson, a robust man in his 50s with a booming laugh and kind eyes, welcomed Cora as warmly as his wife had. Their grown son, Thomas, and his wife, Eleanor, completed the family gathering, along with Kip and the ranch foreman, a taciturn man named Frank who softened visibly when Martha brought out an apple pie for dessert. So, Miss Davis, John said as they enjoyed their meal, Kip tells me you're from back east originally. Philadelphia, was it? Yes, Cora replied, noticing how Kip tensed slightly beside her. My family had a small estate outside the city. And what brings a city girl all the way out to our little corner of Nevada? Eleanor asked with genuine curiosity. Cora had prepared for this question. A fresh start. After my parents passed, there was little left for me there. Well, their loss is our gain, Martha said smoothly, changing the subject. John, tell Cora about the new breeding stock you're bringing in next month. The conversation flowed easily after that, with John enthusiastically describing his plans for improving the ranch's cattle bloodlines. Throughout the evening, Cora was struck by the easy camaraderie among these people, the genuine affection that bound them together beyond mere business relationships. Kip walked her back to her cabin after dinner, the crisp night air filled with the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. The Hendersons are wonderful, Cora said as they reached her door. They're the closest thing to family I have out here, Kip agreed. John gave me a chance when I was just a greenhorn who barely knew one end of a cow from the other. They seem to think highly of you. I've worked hard to earn their trust." He paused at her doorstep. "Cora, about what you told them tonight." "It wasn't a complete lie," she said softly. "My parents are gone, and there truly is nothing left for me in Philadelphia except painful memories. I understand why you wouldn't want to share everything. Just know that the Hendersons are discreet. If you ever decide to tell them more, it wouldn't change how they see you." "Thank you, but for now, I'd prefer to be simply Cora Davis, the new cook." Kip nodded. "Fair enough. I'll come by in the morning to show you around the cookhouse." He hesitated, then added, "Sleep well, Cora." "Good night, Kip." As the door closed between them, Cora leaned against it, listening to his retreating footsteps. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt the stirring of possibilities beyond mere survival. The ranch, with its rhythm of honest work and straightforward relationships, offered a vision of life she had almost forgotten could exist. The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Cora learned the rhythms of ranch life, rising before dawn to prepare breakfast for the hands, planning hearty midday meals that would sustain them through long hours of physical labor, and crafting satisfying suppers that brought the men together at the end of the day. The cowboys, initially wary of the refined Eastern woman in their midst, quickly warmed to her when they tasted her cooking. They respected her boundaries and treated her with a courtesy that, while sometimes rough around the edges, was genuine. Kip maintained a respectful distance, careful not to give the ranch hands any reason to gossip, but he found small ways to be present in her daily life, bringing her first pick of fresh eggs from the henhouse, delivering a load of firewood before a cold snap, stopping by the cookhouse just as she was finishing the dishes to walk her back to her cabin in the evenings. As December approached, bringing with it the first heavy snows of winter, Cora found herself settling into a contentment she hadn't dared hope for. The remote location of the ranch had eased her constant fear of Charles finding her, and the honest work gave her a sense of purpose and pride. One evening, as she was closing up the cookhouse after supper, John Henderson stopped by, stomping snow from his boots at the door. "Evening, Miss Davis. Got a moment?" "Of course, Mr. Henderson. Would you like some coffee? The pot's still warm." "Wouldn't say no." He settled his large frame onto a bench at one of the long tables while Cora poured him a cup. "Wanted to talk to you about Christmas." "Christmas?" she echoed, sitting across from him. Martha's adamant about celebrating properly, even out here in the middle of nowhere. His eyes crinkled with affection for his wife. "Every year we host a dinner for the hands and any family that can make it. There's music, dancing, too much food, and generally a good time had by all." "It sounds wonderful." "It is. And this year, Martha's hoping you'll help with the preparations. She says you've got a lighter touch with pastry than she ever will." Cora smiled, warmed by the compliment. "I'd be honored to help." "Excellent. There's something else." John sipped his coffee, regarding her thoughtfully over the rim. "Martha and I are heading to Sacramento the week before Christmas to pick up our daughter and her family. They're coming for the holiday. We'll be gone about 10 days. I'll make sure everything runs smoothly in the cookhouse while you're away," Cora assured him. "I know you will." "But that's not my concern." He set down his cup. "Miss Davis, Cora, Kip told us something of your situation when he asked if we'd take you on. Not everything, I suspect, but enough." Cora tensed. "What did he tell you? That you're running from a husband who hurt you badly? That there might be people looking for you?" John's voice was gentle but direct. "Now, I don't need to know the details. Your past is your business, but I want you to know that while we're gone, I've asked Kip to keep a special eye on things around here, particularly your safety." "I see." Cora wasn't sure whether to feel embarrassed that her situation was known or grateful for their concern. "You've become important to this ranch in a short time," John continued. "Not just because you can make a biscuit light enough to float, though that doesn't hurt." He smiled briefly. "But because you've brought something back that we were missing, a certain grace, I suppose." "Mr. Henderson, I don't know what to say." "Nothing to say, just wanted you to know that we consider you family now, and family looks out for each other." He stood, placing his empty cup on the table. "Now I should let you finish up here. Early start, tomorrow we're moving the herd to the south pasture before the next storm hits. After he left, Cora sat alone in the cookhouse, turning his words over in her mind. Family. It had been so long since she'd felt part of something like that, a group of people who cared for each other's well-being simply because they chose to, not out of obligation or appearance. The Hendersons departed for Sacramento the following week, leaving Kip in charge of the ranch operations. With winter setting in earnest, the work slowed somewhat, though there were still cattle to feed, horses to care for, and endless maintenance to be done. Cora found herself spending more time with Kip as he took his meals in the cookhouse with the other hands rather than at the main house. Their friendship deepened through conversations that stretched long after the other men had returned to the bunkhouse. 4 days after the Hendersons left, a blizzard swept down from the mountains with little warning. By mid-afternoon, the snow was falling so heavily that visibility was reduced to mere yards. Kip ordered the men to secure the livestock and then stay inside until the storm passed. Cora was preparing a hearty stew for supper when Kip burst into the cookhouse, snow covering his coat and hat. "Storm's getting worse," he announced to the handful of men already gathered inside. "Frank, make sure the new calves are in the barn with their mothers. Jake, check that the horses' water troughs won't freeze. The rest of you get any equipment under cover." The men hurried to obey, leaving Kip and Cora alone in the cookhouse. "Is there anything I should do?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Make sure you've got enough firewood in your cabin. This looks like it might last a couple of days." He removed his hat, shaking off the snow. "I'll bring a lantern by later in case the storm takes down any lines and we lose power to the cabins." "I'm more worried about all of you out in this weather," Cora said, concern evident in her voice. "We've weathered worse." Kip's smile was reassuring, but I appreciate the concern. By supper time, the storm had intensified into a full-blown blizzard. The wind howled around the buildings, driving the snow into drifts that already reached halfway up some of the windows. The cowboys arrived for their meal in 2s and 3s, stamping snow from their boots and rubbing cold, reddened hands. "Never seen it come on this fast," Frank commented as he accepted a bowl of stew from Cora. "Good thing we got the stock secured when we did. Any problems with the herd?" Kip asked, joining them at the table. "Nah, they've got enough sense to huddle together and keep warm. It's the yearlings I worry about, but Jake got them into the south barn." The meal was quieter than usual, the men tired from battling the elements and concerned about what the morning would bring. As they finished eating, Kip stood to address them. "I want a fire watch tonight, 2-hour shifts. Frank, work out the rotation. Main concern is the barns. If we lose power, we need to make sure the emergency lamps are working so the animals don't panic in the dark." The men nodded their understanding, and Kip continued, "Miss Davis, once the kitchen's cleaned up, I'll walk you back to your cabin. It's easy to get disoriented in a whiteout like this, even on familiar ground." After the others had left and the dishes were done, Kip helped Cora into her heavy coat and wrapped an extra scarf around her neck. "Keep your head down and stay close to me," he instructed as they stepped out into the swirling snow. The short walk from the cookhouse to Cora's cabin was a battle against the wind, which seemed determined to push them off course. Kip kept one arm firmly around her shoulders, guiding her through the blinding whiteness. When they reached her cabin, he insisted on coming inside to make sure the stove was working properly and that she had enough wood to last the night. "I think I'm set," Cora said as he checked the damper on the stove. "Thank you for making sure everyone got back safely. Just doing my job." He straightened, removing his gloves to warm his hands by the stove, "but I'll feel better knowing you're secure here. If anything happens during the night, if the fire goes out or you need help for any reason, the bunkhouse is just over there." He pointed through the window, though the building was invisible through the driving snow. "Hang a lantern in the window and someone will come." "I will." "But I'm sure I'll be fine." She hesitated, then added, "You'll be careful out there." The concern in her voice brought a warmth to his eyes. "I promise. I've got too much to look forward to these days to take foolish risks." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding that had been building for months, a recognition of feelings neither had put into words. "Kip, Cora began, but was interrupted by a pounding on the door. Kip opened it to find Jake, one of the younger hands, his face red with cold and exertion. "Fire in the south barn," he gasped. "Lightning must have hit it. Frank sent me to get you." Kip was immediately alert. "How bad?" "Just starting when I left. Frank's organizing a bucket line." "I'm coming." Kip turned back to Cora. "Stay here, stay warm, we'll handle this." "Be careful," she called after him as he disappeared into the swirling snow with Jake. Cora paced her small cabin, worry gnawing at her. The south barn housed the youngest cattle and several valuable horses. If the fire spread in this wind, she couldn't just sit and wait. Decision made, she pulled on her coat, wrapped the scarf around her face, and stepped out into the blizzard. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet, but she leaned into it, following the faint glow of the fire in the distance. As she approached the barn, she could see the men formed into a chain, passing buckets of water from the well to the section of the roof where flames were visible through the smoke. Kip was at the front of the line, directing the effort, his face illuminated by the orange glow of the fire. "What can I do?" Cora shouted over the wind as she reached the group. Kip turned, his expression a mixture of surprise and alarm. "Cora, you shouldn't be out here." "I want to help," she insisted. "Tell me what to do." Seeing her determination, he nodded toward a group of men leading frightened animals out of the barn. "Help them calm the horses. They're panicking from the smoke." Cora made her way to where several hands were struggling to control the agitated horses. Drawing on childhood memories of her father's stables, she approached a particularly distressed mare, speaking softly and keeping her movements slow and deliberate. "Easy, girl," she murmured, taking the lead rope from a grateful ranch hand. "You're safe now, easy." For the next hour, Cora helped move the animals to the safety of another barn, soothing them with gentle words and touches. The work was exhausting in the harsh conditions, but she pushed through, driven by the knowledge that these animals' lives depended on their efforts. Finally, a cheer went up from the men at the bucket line. The fire was out, extinguished before it could spread beyond one corner of the barn's roof. The damage was minimal, thanks to their quick response and the wet snow that had helped dampen the flames. Kip found Cora in the second barn, where she was rubbing down a nervous colt with straw to dry his snow-dampened coat. "You're a natural with them," he observed, his voice hoarse from shouting over the storm. She looked up, noticing the exhaustion etched on his face and the soot that streaked his clothing. "Is it over? Did everyone get out safely?" "Fire's out. No injuries, human or animal." He leaned against the stall door, watching her work. "You shouldn't have come out in this, Cora." "It was dangerous. I couldn't just wait in my cabin, not knowing if everyone was all right." She finished with the colt and straightened, suddenly aware of how cold and tired she was. Kip noticed her shiver. "Let's get you back to your cabin. You're frozen through." The storm had abated somewhat, making the walk back easier than before. Inside her cabin, the warmth of the stove was a welcome relief after the biting cold. "You should get out of those wet clothes," Kip said, concern evident in his voice. "You could catch your death." "What about you?" "You're soaked and covered in soot. I'll change at the bunkhouse, but first I need to make sure you're all right." He knelt to add more wood to the stove, building up the fire. "What you did tonight, helping with the horses, that was brave." "It wasn't bravery," Cora said softly. "It was necessity. You all needed help." Kip stood, turning to face her. "That's what bravery is, Cora, doing what needs to be done despite your fear." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "You're the bravest person I know." Something in his gaze, in the quiet conviction of his words, broke through the final barrier around Cora's heart. Without thinking, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. For a moment, Kip seemed surprised, but then his arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. The kiss deepened, months of unspoken feelings finally finding expression. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that since the day you arrived in Cimarron," Kip admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "I've wanted you to," Cora confessed, "but I was afraid. Of so many things. And now I'm still afraid," she smiled up at him. "But some things are worth being afraid for." Kip brushed a strand of damp hair from her face, his touch gentle. Cora, I need you to know that I love you, have for months now. But I understand your situation is complicated. If you need time, she silenced him with another kiss. Time won't change how I feel. I love you too, Kip. I think I have since that day by the creek when you saw me really saw me and didn't turn away. I could never turn away from you. His arms tightened around her, but there's the matter of your husband. The mention of Charles brought reality crashing back. Yes, Charles, we'll find a way, Kip promised. There are laws for situations like yours. Abandonment, cruelty, they're grounds for divorce in Nevada territory. You've researched this, Cora asked, surprised. I've hoped, Cora, hoped that someday you might consider a future with me. His expression was earnest, vulnerable. I'm not asking for promises tonight, just know that whatever comes, I'm by your side. The blizzard raged on outside, but inside Cora's cabin, a different kind of storm had passed, leaving in its wake a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She knew there would be challenges ahead. Charles wouldn't let her go easily, and the path to legal freedom would be difficult. But for the first time, she wasn't facing those challenges alone. Stay with me tonight, she whispered. Just to talk, to be together. I don't want to be alone anymore. Kip nodded, understanding. I'll stay as long as you want me to. They spent the night talking by the light of the stove, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Kip told her about his childhood in Boston, about losing his father to consumption and deciding to seek his fortune in the West. Cora spoke about her parents, about the happiness of her early life and the gradual descent into terror that her marriage had become. As dawn broke, the storm having blown itself out during the night, they found themselves planning a future neither had dared hope for just days before. I have some land, Kip revealed as they watched the sunrise paint the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. 100 acres north of here that I've been buying piece by piece over the years. There's a spot overlooking a valley that would be perfect for a house. Your own ranch. Cora asked, intrigued by this glimpse of his dreams. That was the plan, build something that would be mine that I could pass on someday. He took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. Now I'm thinking it could be ours if that's something you might want. The idea of a home that was truly hers, built on love rather than fear, brought tears to Cora's eyes. I'd want that more than anything. The days following the blizzard were filled with work as the ranch recovered from the storm's damage, but they were also filled with a new sense of purpose for Cora and Kip. They kept their relationship discreet out of respect for her complicated situation. But the ranch hands weren't blind to the change between them. Frank, the gruff foreman who rarely commented on personal matters, pulled Kip aside one afternoon as they were repairing the barn roof. About you and Miss Davis, he began awkwardly. Kip tensed, preparing for disapproval. What about us, Frank? Just wanted to say it's about time. Frank hammered a nail with more force than necessary. Woman deserves some happiness after whatever hell she ran from. Kip relaxed slightly. You noticed, we all did. Marks like that don't come from falling downstairs, no matter what she might have said. Frank glanced at him. Men who hit women aren't men in my book. If her husband ever shows his face around here, he'll have more than you to deal with. The knowledge that the ranch hands had silently appointed themselves Cora's protectors touched Kip deeply. I appreciate that, Frank. So would she, though I hope it never comes to that. Hope's good. Being prepared is better. Frank returned to his work, the subject closed as far as he was concerned. The Hendersons returned from Sacramento a week before Christmas, bringing with them their daughter, Emily, her husband, Robert, and their 2 young children. The main house came alive with preparations for the holiday, and Cora found herself welcomed into the family celebrations as if she'd always been part of them. Martha was effusive in her praise of how well the ranch had run in her absence, especially after hearing about the fire and Cora's role in helping save the animals. You've found your place here, haven't you? Martha observed as they prepared pies for the Christmas feast, the kitchen warm and fragrant with spices. I have, Cora admitted. It feels more like home than anywhere has in a very long time. Martha's knowing glance told Cora that her relationship with Kip hadn't gone unnoticed. He's a good man. John and I have always thought of him as the son we never had. "He is good," Cora agreed softly. "Better than I dared hope for. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." Martha rolled out another piece of pie dough with practiced ease. Sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. Christmas Eve at the Double Cross was everything John had promised, a joyous celebration that brought together the entire ranch community. The main house was decorated with pine boughs and candles. A massive tree stood in the corner, adorned with handmade ornaments, and tables groaned under the weight of the feast Cora and Martha had prepared. After dinner, Robert played the fiddle while Emily accompanied him on the piano that John had shipped from San Francisco years earlier as a wedding gift to Martha. The ranch hands and house staff joined the family in dancing, the formality of employer and employee set aside for the holiday. Kip found Cora watching from the sidelines and held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Davis?" She placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her to the center of the room where other couples were already dancing to a lively reel. "I haven't danced in years," she confessed as he placed his hand respectfully at her waist. "Neither have I. We can stumble together." But they didn't stumble. They moved in perfect harmony as if they'd been dancing together all their lives. When the music slowed to a waltz, Kip drew her closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Merry Christmas, Cora," he murmured for her ears alone. "Merry Christmas, Kip." She smiled up at him, aware of the curious but approving glances from those around them. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, John Henderson tapped a fork against his glass to gain everyone's attention. "Before you all head off to your beds, Martha and I have an announcement." He placed an arm around his wife's shoulders. "As some of you know, I've been considering retirement for a while now. These old bones aren't what they used to be." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. John continued, "We've decided that come spring, we'll be turning over the day-to-day management of the Double Cross to someone who's proven himself more than capable." All eyes turned to Kip, who looked genuinely shocked. "Kip Keller has been the backbone of this ranch for years," John said, his voice filled with pride. "Martha and I will still own the place, still live here, but the running of it will be in Kip's hands as general manager, with Frank continuing as foreman." A cheer went up from the ranch hands who clearly approved of the choice. Kip stepped forward, emotion evident on his face as he shook John's hand. "I don't know what to say, sir. It's an honor I never expected. You've earned it, son." John clapped him on the shoulder. "And if I'm reading the situation correctly, you might need a more substantial position soon." His gaze flickered briefly to Cora, who felt her cheeks warm. After the party, Kip walked Cora back to her cabin, both of them quiet as they absorbed the events of the evening. "Congratulations," she said as they reached her door. "It's a tremendous opportunity." "It is." Kip looked up at the star-filled sky. "Changes things in a good way." "How so?" "The land I've been buying. I was planning to leave the Double Cross eventually, start my own place." He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "But this means security, a future that's already built. I could still develop my land, but without the pressure of making it our sole livelihood." "Our livelihood," Cora repeated, the word sending a shiver of anticipation through her. "Yes, Kip's expression was serious now. "Cora, I know we haven't talked specifically about what happens next, but I want you to know that I'm committed to finding a way for us to be together properly. I've been corresponding with a lawyer in Carson City about your situation." "You have?" This was news to her. "I didn't want to worry you with legal details until I knew what options were available." He squeezed her hands gently. "Nevada Territory's laws on divorce are more progressive than back east. Extreme cruelty is grounds for dissolution of marriage, and what you endured certainly qualifies." Hope flared in Cora's chest. "You think it's possible? I know it is. It won't be easy, and your husband might contest it, but with proper legal representation and witnesses to your condition when you arrived in Cimarron." He paused. "The marshal remembers, as does Mrs. Wilson. Both have agreed to testify if needed." Tears welled in Cora's eyes. "You've thought of everything. I want to give you the future you deserve, Cora, a life without fear, without looking over your shoulder." He released her hands to cup her face gently. I want to marry you, to build that house on my land and fill it with laughter and love. But only if that's what you want too. It is, she whispered, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. It's everything I want. His kiss was tender, a promise of the life they would build together once the shadows of her past were finally dispelled. The new year brought change and movement toward that promised future. Kip traveled to Carson City with Cora to meet with the lawyer, who confirmed that her case for divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty was strong. The process was initiated, with papers served to Charles in Philadelphia through legal representatives. The response came swifter than expected. Charles contested the divorce vehemently, claiming Cora had abandoned him without cause and demanding her return to Philadelphia. When that failed, he announced his intention to travel to Nevada to reclaim his errant wife personally. The news hit Cora like a physical blow. Her worst fear, Charles finding her, was about to become reality. But the terror that would once have paralyzed her was now tempered by the knowledge that she wasn't facing him alone. He can come, Kip said firmly when they received word that Charles had boarded a train east. But he'll find that things are different here than in Philadelphia. You're not isolated anymore, Cora. You have people who care about you, who know the truth. I'm still frightened, she admitted. You don't know him, how charming he can be, how he can twist the truth. His charm won't work on folks who have seen your scars, both the visible ones and those he left on your heart. Kip's jaw set in determination. Trust in the truth, Cora, trust in us. Charles Davenport arrived in Cimarron on a crisp February morning, stepping from the stagecoach with the confident air of a man accustomed to deference. Dressed in an expensive suit that marked him immediately as an outsider, he cut an impressive figure, handsome, well-spoken, with the polished manners of Eastern society. He took a room at the hotel and immediately began inquiring about his wife. Mrs. Wilson, forewarned of his arrival, claimed ignorance of any woman matching Cora's description. Marshal Evans was similarly unhelpful, suggesting that perhaps Mr. Davenport's wife had continued her journey elsewhere. Frustrated but undeterred, Charles expanded his inquiries, offering increasingly generous rewards for information. Finally, a traveling salesman who had visited the Double Cross mentioned a new cook there who matched the description. Word reached the ranch through Frank, who had gone to town for supplies. He's asking for directions to Double Cross, he informed Kip and Cora grimly. Claims his wife works here now, then we face him on our terms, Kip decided. Not alone, Cora, the whole ranch stands with you. When Charles Davenport rode up to the main house of the Double Cross the following day, he found John Henderson waiting for him on the porch. Mr. Davenport, I presume, John said, not extending his hand. I understand you're looking for someone, my wife, Charles replied smoothly. I have reason to believe she's employed here. And why would your wife leave Philadelphia to cook on a cattle ranch in Nevada territory? John's tone was conversational, but his eyes were hard. A misunderstanding, Charles said with a regretful smile. Cora has always been sensitive. Prone to exaggeration, I've come to take her home where she belongs. I see. John studied him for a moment. Well, why don't you come inside? We can discuss this matter civilly. In the Hendersons' parlor, Charles found himself facing not only John but Martha, Kip, and the ranch foreman, Frank. There was no sign of Cora. Where is my wife? Charles demanded, his charming facade beginning to crack under their scrutiny. Safe, Kip answered, and planning to stay that way. Charles's eyes narrowed as he assessed the cowboy. And who might you be, Kip Keller? General manager of the Double Cross and the man who's going to make sure Cora never has to fear you again. A dangerous smile spread across Charles's face. Ah, I see. You've developed an interest in my wife. I should warn you, sir, that Cora is prone to flights of fancy and manipulation when it suits her purposes. Strange, Martha interjected. That doesn't sound like the woman we know, the one who works harder than anyone, who never complains, who flinched at loud noises for months after she arrived. The one who had bruises on her arms and face that no accidental fall could explain, Frank added. Charles's expression hardened. Whatever she's told you, she didn't have to tell us anything, Kip interrupted. The evidence was written on her body and in her eyes every time a man raised his voice near her. This is absurd, Charles sputtered. She is my wife, legally bound to me. I demand to see her immediately. She doesn't want to see you, John said firmly. And on my ranch, we respect a lady's wishes. Then perhaps the law will be more accommodating. Charles reached into his coat pocket and produced an official-looking document, a court order from Pennsylvania requiring the return of my wife to my custody. She is not of sound mind, you see, prone to delusions and hysteria. Kip took the paper, glancing over it before passing it to John. This has no jurisdiction in Nevada territory, Mr. Davenport. And we have medical testimony from our local doctor documenting Cora's injuries when she arrived, injuries consistent with repeated beatings, not accidents or delusions. Charles's charm disappeared entirely, his face contorting with rage. She is my wife, my property. I'll not be denied by a bunch of uncouth ranchers and a woman who's clearly shared her favors to gain your protection. The accusation hung in the air for a moment before Kip moved with lightning speed, grabbing Charles by his expensive lapels and pushing him against the wall. Say that again, he growled, his voice dangerously quiet. Kip. Cora's voice from the doorway stopped him. She stood there, pale but composed, her head held high. Let him go. He isn't worth the trouble you'd find yourself in. Kip released Charles reluctantly, stepping back but remaining protectively close to Cora as she entered the room. Charles smoothed his rumpled jacket, his face a mask of injured dignity. Cora, darling, I've been so worried. It's time to come home now. I am home, Charles. Her voice was steady, though Kip could see the slight tremor in her hands. And I'm not going anywhere with you. Don't be ridiculous. You're my wife. Not for much longer. Cora squared her shoulders. I've filed for divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty. The case is already before the territorial court. No court will grant a divorce to a hysterical woman who abandoned her husband without cause, Charles scoffed. Especially not when that husband has traveled across the country to reclaim her. They will when they see the evidence, John Henderson interjected, and hear the testimony of respectable witnesses who saw her condition upon arrival in Cimarron. Charles looked from face to face, realizing he had miscalculated badly. These people weren't the easily intimidated servants he was accustomed to. They had rallied around Cora, forming a protective barrier he couldn't breach with his usual tactics. His expression changed, softening as he turned to Cora. Darling, whatever grievances you think you have, we can resolve them privately as husband and wife should. I admit I've perhaps been stern at times, but only out of concern for your well-being. Stern, Cora repeated incredulously. You broke my ribs, Charles. You nearly strangled me because dinner was cold. You prohibited me from seeing friends or family, from leaving the house without your permission. Exaggerations, he dismissed with a wave. You were always prone to dramatics, not this time. Cora reached into her pocket and withdrew a small notebook. I kept a record, Charles. Dates, injuries, witnesses when there were any. Your housekeeper saw more than you realized. So did your valet. Both have provided sworn statements. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Charles's face. No one would believe servants over a man of my standing. Perhaps not in Philadelphia society, Martha said, but here a person is judged by their actions, not their bank account or family name. Charles's demeanor shifted again, anger replacing his feigned contrition. I will not be humiliated by this farce. Cora, you will return with me now, or I swear you'll regret it. The only one making threats here is you, Mr. Davenport, Kip observed quietly. Not the actions of a loving husband concerned for his wife's welfare. Charles lunged forward suddenly, attempting to grab Cora's arm. You're coming with me, Kip intercepted him, pushing him back with enough force to send him stumbling. Frank moved to block the doorway, and John Henderson stepped between Charles and Cora. That's enough, John said firmly. Mr. Davenport, you're no longer welcome on my property. You can leave under your own power, or my men will escort you off. Your choice. Charles straightened his jacket again, his eyes cold with fury. This isn't over. She's still legally my wife, and I'll have her back one way or another. Is that a threat, Mr. Davenport? Marshal Evans's voice came from the doorway where he stood with a hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. Because threatening a woman in my jurisdiction is something I take personally. Marshal, John greeted him. Good timing. Mr. Davenport was just leaving. I'll escort him back to town, Evans said, his gaze never leaving Charles. Make sure he gets on tomorrow's stage heading east. You can't do this, Charles protested. I have rights. In my territory, the right to safety supersedes any husband's claim, Evans replied. Especially when that husband has a documented history of violence. Now, are you coming peacefully, or do I need to use these? He patted the handcuffs at his belt. Faced with no alternative, Charles allowed himself to be escorted out. At the door, he turned back to Cora, his expression venomous. This isn't over. No one leaves Charles Davenport. After he was gone, Cora's composure crumbled. She sank onto a chair, her entire body shaking. He'll be back, she whispered. He never gives up when he feels he's been challenged. Kip knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his. Let him come. Next time we'll be even more prepared. He squeezed her hands gently. You were incredible, Cora. You stood your ground and faced your worst fear. We're all proud of you, dear, Martha added, coming to sit beside her. And we'll see this through together as a family. True to his word, Charles didn't give up easily. He attempted to challenge the jurisdiction of the territorial court, hired lawyers to drag out the proceedings, and even tried to bribe witnesses to change their testimony about Cora's condition when she arrived in Cimarron. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the community of Cimarron and the Double Cross stood firmly behind Cora. Mrs. Wilson testified about the bruises she'd seen when Cora first arrived. Dr. Miller provided medical evidence of old and new injuries consistent with repeated abuse. Even the stagecoach driver who had brought Cora to Cimarron came forward to describe how she had winced in pain with every bump in the road. The court proceedings dragged on through the spring, with Charles remaining in Carson City to personally oversee his case. During this time, Cora continued her work at the ranch, drawing strength from the supportive community around her and her deepening relationship with Kip. In late May, the territorial judge finally issued his ruling, divorce granted on grounds of extreme cruelty with no financial obligations on either side. Cora was legally free. When news reached the Double Cross, the celebration was spontaneous and joyful. The ranch hands broke out a barrel of whiskey that had been saving for a special occasion, and Martha organized an impromptu feast. That evening, as twilight painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Kip led Cora to a hilltop on his property, the land he'd been accumulating parcel by parcel over the years. I wanted to show you something, he said as they reached the summit. Below them stretched a valley, green with spring growth, a creek winding through it like a silver ribbon. This is where I've always imagined building a house someday, Cora took in the breathtaking view. It's beautiful, Kip. I started buying this land 5 years ago, a little at a time. It's not much compared to the Double Cross, but it's good grazing land with plenty of water. He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. Cora Davis, I love you. I think I've loved you since that first day in the general store when you held your head high despite your pain. Tears welled in Cora's eyes as Kip continued. You're free now, free to choose your own path, your own future, and I'm hoping, praying that you might consider sharing that future with me. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. Will you marry me, Cora? Will you build a life with me on this land? Yes, she whispered, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring. Yes, Kip Keller, I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Cora felt the last shadows of her past receding, replaced by the warm light of a future filled with love and possibility. The bruises that had once mapped her body like a constellation of pain were long healed, but their memory remained not as a burden now, but as a testament to her strength and the journey that had led her to this moment, to this man, to this new beginning. Their wedding took place on a perfect summer day in July, with the entire population of the Double Cross and most of Cimarron in attendance. John Henderson gave the bride away, and Martha wept openly as Cora and Kip exchanged their vows beneath an arch of wildflowers on the hilltop where he had proposed. Cora wore a simple white dress that Martha and the ranch women had helped her make, her auburn hair adorned with daisies and baby's breath. Kip, usually seen in dusty work clothes, cut a handsome figure in a new suit ordered specially from Sacramento. "I, Kip, take you, Cora, to be my wife," he said, his voice clear and strong. "I promise to stand beside you in joy and sorrow, in plenty and in want, in sickness and in health from this day forward, for as long as we both shall live." Cora's voice trembled slightly as she repeated her own vows, overcome by the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the terrified woman fleeing for her life to the confident bride promising her heart to the man who had helped her rediscover her strength. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." As Kip kissed his bride, the assembled guests erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed an army, courtesy of Martha Henderson and Cora's fellow cooks from the ranch. Late in the evening, as the party continued around them, Kip led Cora away from the festivities to a waiting wagon. "Where are we going?" she asked, laughing as he helped her up onto the seat. "Home," he replied with a grin, climbing up beside her and taking the reins. They rode through the moonlit landscape to a spot on Kip's land, their land now, where a cabin stood that hadn't been there when he'd proposed 2 months earlier. "Kip," Cora gasped as she saw the sturdy structure, windows glowing with warm lamplight. How did you? The ranch hands and I have been working on it whenever we could get away," he explained, helping her down from the wagon. "It's not the grand house I planned to build for you eventually, but I thought we might like a place of our own to start our life together." The cabin was simple but beautifully crafted, with a main room containing a fireplace and cooking area and a separate bedroom. Someone Martha, Cora suspected, had filled it with little touches to make it homey: curtains at the windows, a colorful quilt on the bed, wildflowers in a pottery vase on the table. "It's perfect," Cora said, turning to embrace her husband. "Absolutely perfect. Welcome home, Mrs. Keller," Kip murmured against her hair. In the years that followed, Cora and Kip built a life together that exceeded all their dreams. The small cabin was eventually replaced by a proper ranch house as Kip's land holdings expanded and their family grew. They named their ranch the New Dawn, a fitting symbol of the fresh start they had found together. Cora gave birth to their first child, a son they named John after their mentor and friend, in the spring following their marriage. 2 years later, a daughter, Margaret, joined the family, followed by twin boys, Samuel and William, 3 years after that. The Double Cross and New Dawn ranches flourished side by side, with Kip continuing to manage both operations until John Henderson's son-in-law, Robert, moved his family permanently to Nevada to take over the role. The two families remained closely connected, their children growing up together as cousins in all but blood. Cora never lost her love of cooking, though she now prepared meals for her own family rather than a bunkhouse full of cowboys. She became known throughout the region for her hospitality and her legendary apple pies, which won the county fair blue ribbon for 7 consecutive years. Charles Davenport faded into a distant memory, a shadow that occasionally darkened Cora's thoughts but no longer held power over her. They heard through legal channels that he had remarried a young society woman whose family connections he likely valued more than any affection. Cora said a silent prayer for the girl, hoping she would be stronger or luckier than she herself had been. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kip surprised Cora with a journey back to Philadelphia, not to revisit painful memories, but to show their children the city where their mother had been born and to visit the graves of her parents, a pilgrimage she had long wished to make, but had been too afraid to undertake while Charles still lived there. "Are you sure?" Cora asked when he first proposed the trip. "What if we encounter him? Then he'll see a strong, beautiful woman surrounded by a family who adores her," Kip answered, drawing her close. "Not a victim he can intimidate, The journey east was a revelation. Philadelphia had changed in the decade since Cora had fled, as had she. Walking those familiar streets as Mrs. Keller, confident, loved, secure, she felt a final healing of old wounds. They did not encounter Charles during their visit, though they heard he had moved to New York following financial setbacks. The news brought neither satisfaction nor concern to Cora, merely a calm acceptance that his power to affect her life was truly gone. At her parents' graveside, with Kip standing supportive beside her and their children placing wildflowers on the marble markers, Cora felt a sense of completion, of circles closing and new ones beginning. "They would have loved you," she told Kip as they walked away, their children running ahead through the cemetery's green paths. "And been so proud of the grandchildren. I like to think they've been watching over you all along," he replied, his arm around her waist. "Guiding you to Cimarron, to the double cross, to me." Cora smiled up at the man who had seen beyond her bruises to the strength within, who had chosen to stay beside her through darkness and into light. "Then I have even more to thank them for than I realized." As autumn painted the Nevada landscape in hues of gold and crimson that year, Cora stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching Kip teaching their oldest son to ride. Her daughters sat on a blanket nearby, helping the twins build a fortress of twigs and stones. The bruises that had once marked her body were long healed, leaving no visible trace. The emotional scars had faded too, replaced by the confidence that comes from being truly loved and valued. She thought of the frightened woman who had stepped off that stagecoach in Cimarron all those years ago, hiding her pain beneath a layer of trail dust, and marveled at how far she had traveled not just in miles, but in spirit. Kip looked up, catching her eye across the yard, and tipped his hat with a smile that still made her heart skip a beat after all these years. In that moment, standing in the golden light of a Nevada sunset, surrounded by the family they had created together, Cora knew with absolute certainty that this love, this life was what she had been meant for all along. The dust of her journey had settled, revealing not bruises but blessings beyond measure.